are tuned to 1077 KNYO LP, streaming on the web at knyo.org. And I have in the studio Rex Gressett. So, a special edition of Fort Bragg, USA, or as today we might want to call it 3-minute limit. Here's my classic news bumper, and let's just get this sucker going. Once again, 1077 KNYO LP, streaming on the web at knyo.org. Once again, I've got a special guest in the studio. A while back, I had the Real Sarahs doing live music in here. I think before that, what did they do before that? I think it was a visit by Scott Peterson. I like to shake it up, whoever I can get in or out or whatever. And can you hear through those headphones?
No.
Okay, I'm going to make sure you can. How about now?
Now I can.
See, I use them for queuing stuff up on other nights. Okay, so you're on the mic now.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe, for having me in. I've got a lot of stuff I'd like to talk about. I love KYNO. It's one of the most powerful tools that we've got for political organization. I think we should, all of us, be very grateful to KYNO. It's a tremendous asset to the community, and I'm really glad to be on it.
Well, with that, let's get right into the dirt. What's been happening with the city council? Can you give us a casual council roundup? Now, I know there are a few news guys that cover it and write about it, but I've got you here, and you're one of the more frequent attendees, you know, that's not just at home drinking beer, watching it online.
Yeah, I took a little flack from that from KZXY and Z. They thought that it was not entirely trustworthy that I went to all the city council meetings. They felt that I shouldn't be so persistent or something like that. They made me sound like a little old man that goes there and insists on speaking before the microphone and generally bothering the public. But I don't think that there are too many things that I've discovered in my life that I have found to be more fascinating than the Fort Bragg City Council. I've said that in print before, but it's like ancient Athens. It's like the Florence, the Medicis. It's filled with subterfuge and with plots and with misrepresentations and with ambition. It's got everything, and I find it to be very interesting, and yeah, I'm all about the city council.
I love it. Lots.
I mean it. I'm not exaggerating at all. I'm not talking. I mean plots, and I also mean deception and subversion. And having said that, though, it's occurred to me recently that we're really fortunate to have a municipal government the way that we do in Fort Bragg. There are a lot of municipalities where there's no representation at all. And for a little logging town that had to govern itself in the old days and that had to make decisions for itself, to have evolved into now into a sophisticated, complex, well-funded city government, it gives the people of the city and the people of the region a tremendous, I wouldn't say power, but it gives us a way to control our own destinies. And if we don't do it locally, they come in and they swoop down and do it for us. And I'm glad we're not in that category. I think our Fort Bragg city government can be a buffer and a way that we can face the future and that we can really make arrangements on our own behalf. So I'm very grateful that we've got this city council and that we've got the government in Fort Bragg that we do.
Wow. Yeah, me too. I'm really happy that in the last two elections the people have spoke, and we've
didn't they?
Yeah,
they spoke loudly.
A few council members, and I don't always agree with everyone.
Right.
Maybe especially one incumbent, but I think that the new blood is good. And I have to say, I especially dig Mike, because if you're talking city infrastructure, if you're talking infrastructure about the city, about repaving a block or doing anything, he'll say, well, back in 1987 we tore that up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whether he's in the council or not, I'd love him to be, I know he's retired on his job, but he could be easily a consultant about city infrastructure here. I hope he never moves away.
Yeah, well, he should have been the mayor. And when they finessed Lindy Peters into the mayor's slot, they did it without any kind of due process at all. They just sort of shuffled the deck, and all of a sudden, Lindy popped up as the mayor. It was a completely inexplicable choice. And I had gone to cue ball. That was Semolino. Mike Semolino is cue ball locally in Fort Bragg. And I had demanded, basically, and pounded on his coffee table and said, look, you've got to be the mayor. You know more about the city than anybody else. And he wouldn't do it. He declined to do it, and so we got the mayor that we have. But cue ball is a big advantage to the city of Fort Bragg.
One thing that Lundy does have is he's been formerly a mayor and knows the formalities of the meetings very well.
And government. It's not just Fort Bragg. He's been around. You know, Lindy's got a lot of things going for him. I'm not against Lindy.
Yeah. Oh, what was I going to say? Oh, if you think that formality was interesting, if you remember 2 years previously when they were about to change mayors, I think Scott Dietz interrupted Q to say, I nominate, Dave Turner. Right as Q was about to nominate Lindy. And if you watch the meeting, it was this little short interruption. It's like, okay, that's done.
Yeah, they do that. That's how Lindy got the job this time.
You got to be
absolutely
head on a swivel.
Absolutely. When they're ready to put one over, they put it over like a guy hitting a hardball pitch. They just do it quick.
What's the biggest, ugliest project coming up that you know of? Yeah, I mean, anything on the radar that's big and ugly.
Yeah,
not talking pretty pictures on walls.
No.
Grants for murals.
Yeah, no. The biggest. Well, I'm obsessing still over the last city council meeting in which once again, Joe. I thought it was very subtly done. I guess they did it openly, but they just gave $3 million away to the richest not-for-profit in Fort Bragg. And that I couldn't believe it. And they did it right in the face and in opposition to an investment in infrastructure, a critical investment in infrastructure, which we could have needed. Let me go back though a second. There's been a development in Fort Bragg of a social services industry. People come here and they bring kids that have disabilities. We have the Project Sanctuary and half a dozen other social service agencies, all of whom get funded by the city. And while they've been building this over the course of Linda Ruffing's tenure, while they've been pumping money into these social services organizations, they've neglected the infrastructure of the city to a scandalous degree. There are still redwood pipes, hollowed out redwood logs that are bringing our water to our.
But how many feet of those actually still
not many
exist?
Not many. It's more of a metaphor than anything else. Yeah, but without question, the infrastructure is very deteriorated. And it has not been to put it mildly, it hasn't been the focus of the city manager. She's just let it go while she built a constituency and relied on the fact that Fort Bragg doesn't have any media to be complaining about not putting in new sewer pipes. Since nobody knew what was going on, they just dumped the money into the pockets of the people that they thought would vote for them. It worked great. It was a super system for a long time.
I have a funny story, not about sewer pipes, but about the supply lines.
Right.
I dated a girl, okay?
Right.
And when you date girls that are like homeowners, sometimes you're like, sure, I'll dig up your whole yard because, they're feeding you, sex, whatever else is involved. But this girl paid me. And I was on this street and I was going to dig a French drain because she had elevation issues. And in the winter, her whole underneath her house would flood.
Right. There's a lot of houses like that.
Yeah. And I also changed all of her heating ducts right up to her furnace and tied them up nice and tight. And then I went and I started digging a trench around her house.
Right.
And she said, there used to be a French drain that went like this around her house and pointed. So I came across this pipe, and what I thought it was like the output from like the perforated pipe eventually would turn into a solid pipe and go to this drain on one end of the property. So I'm banging on it and I break it and I realize it's a 4-inch city water main down a dead end street. Why it's a 4-inch, that doesn't really go anywhere. Oversized. I hit it and I looked at my phone because nobody wears watches anymore. And it's like 4:58 on a Friday. And all I thought was, who the hell do I call to fix a 4-inch main right as the guys are closing the gate at the city yard?
Right.
So I called electrician guy, Russ Merritt, who's a fireman. He's an electrical contractor, mostly retired, I guess now. I said, Russ, I got an issue. You're a fireman. Who do I call? And he goes, call Stu DeNevy, from the city yard. So I get Stu's number. And eventually he comes down in his little, daily driver pickup and goes, oh, okay. He makes a couple phone calls, and pretty soon the camel truck with the big vacuum comes in. They suck out a big hole, and they got 4 or 5 guys there, and they put a big 4-inch repair clamp around it. And my blood, that like that feeling you get when you're in really deep crap, Yeah,
I feel that all the time.
Like when you're about to get arrested. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just rushing, going, I'm going to get the biggest bill ever.
Yeah, like $20,000.
Yeah, I'm thinking, 4 or 5 guys overtime with the camel truck.
Right.
I never got a bill or heard a peep. And you know what I learned about it? I was down at the Tip Top, and I was having a beer, and Don Bailey, the old pump guy, was sitting next to me with his little pink vodka drink that he's always drinking.
Right.
And he goes, well, you know what it is? That's transite pipe. It has asbestos in it. And I said, oh, really? And
this was a pipe that took water
to
people's houses?
Yes, it's transite pipe that's very old, and it has asbestos in it. Now, technically, it's supposed to be safe under normal conditions. But what he says is in the past, what the city would do is instead of regulating the chlorination of the city lines like exactly, sometimes they go, well, it's low, and they'll throw a 50-gallon barrel of chlorine in and bump it, and then let it drop or something like that. And he says,
and the chlorine eats the pipe.
Yeah, when you have the higher levels of chlorine, that'll eat the pipe.
Right.
So if I was to bring that up, this was his angle on it, or why I didn't get a bill. He says, if you were to bring it up in court that it's transite pipe, the city might be liable to replace like 2 or 3 blocks of main right down a paved.
Right.
Or I don't know, but that might have been a key component to why I didn't get billed.
Well,
or it might be fluff, but I was thinking part of our city infrastructure still there's transite pipe.
There, the thing is that I don't know enough about the city infrastructure to know what exactly that they need. But what I have observed is that they take all the money that they've got and don't put it into infrastructure. And the development of these various agencies and affiliated groups and helping agencies is all kind of nice. I mean, I think everybody basically likes it. I mean, everybody, we love our kids that are around. We think that the people that take care of them that have good jobs. It's really nice. It's a pleasant thing for the city to be able to do. But you take a look, you take 2 steps back and you say, wow, that's all they're doing. They're pumping money into this, into a system, and they're ignoring their responsibilities as a municipality. And you can see the toilet paper if you walk down the streets of Fort Bragg and look down into the grills and the grates where the water runs in down, and then you see toilet paper floating down there from people's houses flood,
I'd have to argue, though, that they do put money back into the infrastructure, because when they had $60,000 left over of the overbilling of commercial water,
right,
they put it right into those automated window blinds for town hall. That's infrastructure, baby.
Right. Well, they've got an electric charging station right in Fort Bragg City Hall, the parking lot, where all the public employees, if they've got electric cars, they've got a charging station. So they do.
Well, I think that's actually,
they do take infrastructure.
That is kind of cool. And actually, along with that, there's another public parking space that's in between the brewery and the old Masonic. Right. That one, ever since I moved back here in '89, I used to mountain bike everywhere. And I noticed one time going around sidewalks that buried in the bushes back by the alley was a very old, totally rusted out, like electric car charging station that I don't believe has ever charged a car.
Wow.
Because it was buried in a bush. So the other day I'm going down there to meet a client down Laurel Street, and as I'm going down there, I see either that was updated or something was updated, because the electrical panel that's on that alley is the most beautiful, because I'm an electrician. I see this stuff, a
fine electrician.
And well, we'll see. I'm alive, but I see the electrical panel that they put in is stainless steel, and I thought, that's an expensive box.
Right.
No residence orders a commercial panel that's stainless steel to put on their house. You order one that's gray painted, and then 6 years it's rusted out,
city
you change
money
it again.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fascinating. Right. Anyway, moving along, not to totally just ramp around that stuff.
We can go back to that.
Somebody had mentioned the other day that there's a real estate sign back at the Hare Creek zone. Do you
know
anything about that? Is that project on hold? We had a debate about that.
Right. There has been a debate about it, and there is a sign. There is a sign. It says 14 acres. I think that they want $4 million for the property.
Yeah.
So the Hare Creek project is not on hold. It's crawling back behind the scenes to stab us in the back yet. And what we're going to end up with is a shopping mall on the Hare Creek property. I pretty much resigned myself to that. And the reason that I don't think that there's any possibility of saving it is because I don't think that the city council will. I just don't believe that they have the strength or the determination or the concern to do anything major. I think that they're
it's kind of like
it's an amateur hour.
Either the city's going to purchase it,
right,
or we're going to tell these guys that you're not allowed to exercise your rights to develop your property,
right, which we cannot do.
Yeah,
which we cannot do. I have never said that the patents should just be, be told that they can't do anything. And that's right.
Those are fair arguments.
They're fair arguments, and I get it from. And also, I'll tell you something else. Having a grocery outlet in Fort Bragg is kind of a good thing. I mean, I've laughed about it. I've mocked them that people would do virtually anything for discounted canned goods, but there is we only have Safeway and Harvest.
Yeah.
It'll be a useful thing, but it's depressing. And ought to be a kind of a signpost to the future that what we have to do is reform the city council so the city council can undertake projects if we have a public meeting or a discussion, the city council doesn't listen to any of that. They can't afford to listen to it because they're so busy figuring out the notes that Linda Ruffing wrote them to tell them what to do that they haven't got time to do anything else. They're not really a strong government body. They're extraordinarily weak. And so I don't think that there's any chance that we can stop Hare Creek or do something intelligible with it without effective leadership. And if there was a large uprising of people that just demanded that they keep that beautiful property virgin, we might be able to do something. But the city council isn't going to be any help to us.
Yeah, I don't really see a win-win on that. I mean, one angle would be we don't own the mill property, but let's say we own the mill property. Let's say the city could annex part of that. Could we trade the same space, zone it commercial, and trade it with the patents?
It's been discussed.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of different angles have been discussed.
No, they talked about.
I just was the first person to
no, they talked about that, and let me just interject something here about the city not owning the mill site. The reason that the city doesn't own the mill site is because they can't get their heads around it. The city, I know for sure, has been offered 3 times to be given the dry sheds. The Georgia Pacific has offered the city the dry sheds 3 separate times. And so the city doesn't own the mill site or doesn't have an interest in the mill site other than just a kind of a passing, a passing interest because they don't, once again, they're not willing to undertake a heavy planning project. I saw David Gurney the other day when they were talking about the city manager, and David, who he and I have bumped heads about a few different issues. He's a hard head and so am I, but he often hits the nail right on the head. And he pointed out that what really is what this is all about is a systemic structural, what we need is a systemic structural alteration in our local government. It just isn't working out anymore. It's not working out for the city, and it's not working out for the city council. It's not working out for the city manager. It's dysfunctional.
Well, the governing bodies have definitely on a cycle, I guess. It's almost like the moon's aligned with Pluto kind of stuff,
right?
Because we've made fairly decent changes in 2 city council elections, and we have a city attorney that's that's put in a resignation before the 3-year term was up.
Well, she quit. She quit in harmony with Linda Ruffing. She knew Linda Ruffing was on the way out before anybody else knew it.
I'm gonna turn your mic just a little bit.
Right.
Yes, and so there's some stuff going on there. I mean, I don't really blame one person when I'm ragging about the city necessarily. I like to write, if our city's governing bodies, I kind of put it out like that because I'm not on the safety commission or the police activities league. I'm not. There's all these like little groups where 2 city council members go into the
ad hoc committees.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not a part of any of them. I'm out of city.
Nobody's a part of them. Those are quasi secret things. When the ad hoc committee doesn't have to explain anything to anybody.
Now here's something we might not agree on.
All right.
But I've got an explanation.
All right.
What do you think of the tree situation in the park?
I love Bainbridge Park. And I was almost like, I was just absolutely totally angry that they cut down.
You were an angry guy.
I was very mad. Well, I love trees, and
yeah.
you know, when you drive around Fort Bragg, we don't have any trees. You can't find.
Yes.
You know it, because if you have dogs in your car, you need to find shade.
Yeah.
And finding shade in Fort Bragg is like finding shade in Saudi Arabia. There are no trees.
Well, I'll tell you my angle on this is I went to one of the Mexican parties where Paulo, our friend from La Bambas, we have a food catering service tent that has all the sides,
right?
Because my wife and I are building up a catering business.
Right, I know you are.
And we were there, and I noticed that, okay, you know, we've had tree issues where the city got slammed pretty hard. Years and years ago, back in the 90s, some ding-dong in council or whatever decided that for decor, they would put these 500-pound terracotta planters
I vaguely
with
remember.
non-native Japanese pine trees and little plants, and they caused so many damage to car doors and stuff. And eventually those got scrapped. I thought it was a stupid idea on the front end, and it was a dumb idea on the way out. I saw the trees that they put in at Bainbridge, and they're not little tiny poles. I mean, they're pretty tiny. I don't know what the cost was, but
$1,500
each.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and that's planted.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I'm not quibbling with the $1,500.
Well, you know what? I think when I looked at them, I thought, well, if you buy a full-grown tree, you're going to be looking at cutting them down again in so many years, and the maintenance. And I thought the size they put there, I looked at them, I thought, I'll bet in 2 more years, nobody's even going to notice that the trees changed, because they're going to grow like beans.
Well, I don't know about that. You know,
well, we'll see in 2 years.
Yeah,
or a year, or, you know.
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, the fence looks nice. And the trees look nice. They've done, you know, they put a bunch of money into it.
I haven't seen the fence.
It looks nice. And they've got an opportunity now to plant flowers on the other side of the fence, you know, where you couldn't put them before because they were in the pedestrian thing. Bainbridge Park looks nice. They did a good job.
I know there's a sidewalk kind of slipped right up.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that.
I'm not sure, but I know Dave Larkin Construction, local concrete, roofing, you know, general building contractor, a friend.
Right.
I've done work for him before. Not concrete, usually electrical on his own house.
Right.
He did that. So, and you know, those jobs are prevailing wage, and I know
kind of messes up touch football, I thought, you know.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, but I mean, he's the builder, but I'm glad that small contract went to a local builder. Yeah.
The wider issue in Bainbridge Park is that street, and it's related to trees, but they're what they call street architecture, the benches that you sit around, you know, little fountains, little pieces of art, you know, all that stuff is missing from Fort Bragg, partially because we're just a little small town. You know, we can't necessarily afford marble sculptures of, you know, who would we have a sculpture of? You know,
somebody painting a mural.
Lindy Peters.
A bronze sculpture of somebody painting a mural.
We could have Lindy. We could get a big, tall sculpture of Lindy, or a painter. But they've taken out almost all the benches, and the driving force behind the design of Bainbridge Park was to try and discourage homeless people from going there. When I just drove by, there was some guy camped out right on the other side of the fence. He looked perfectly comfortable to me.
Yeah.
But the idea was, Lindy told me one time that he'd been told by one of his brother mayors, some little town mayor up. So he said, we got problems with homeless people in Bainbridge Park. You know, nobody likes to see them there. And this guy said, well, you put a fence around it. They don't like being enclosed. It reminds them of jail. And so that was the rationale behind the fence. But now that it's in, it looks very attractive. It looks like we treasure our park. You know, if they'll put planting, if they'll take care of the trees, if they'll do the flowers. I'm reconciled to Bainbridge Park. You know, I think it turned out better than I thought it was going to. And you know, and I got to admit it. I think that those big pine trees that have been cut down, you know, they did a good job.
Well, and you know what? With the bark beetle, you're about to see most of Cleone be a desert, pretty much, because all the trees outside of my landlord's property here, where we're broadcasting from, used to have trees all the way up and around the corner. There was probably 24 more trees, and each year they fall like 2 or 3, because that's, you know, they're pretty retired. And so her husband will go out with one of his buddies and hand out some firewood, say, you know, you cut it, you take it, kind of thing. Right. There's a big burn pile. So, but all of them have bark beetle. I mean, they're all going to be gone.
Well, I said that those trees didn't have bark beetle to a terminal degree. I had heard that bark beetles flourish in drought, and that possibly watering them and bringing it. Look, it's water
without cold. It's got to be below 40, below, you know, freezing for so many hours of the winter to kill them.
Well, this is a good opportunity for me to be wrong. You know, I have to be right. I can't be right 100% of the time. I'm going to have some percentage of being wrong. That was a fairly good one.
Hey, there's a whole bunch of hippies up at the Albion Ridge that were like, "Yeah, Rex, save the trees."
Except I didn't save them. I did. I failed. Rex failed to save the trees, but I'm not embarrassed about sticking up for trees. I'll always stick up for trees and for wild animals. You know, I'm kind of a green when it comes right down to it.
So I got a media question.
Okay.
You occasionally write for the AVA, and
I write every week for the AVA.
All right. Sometimes the language you use is colorful.
A little bit.
You know,
I try not to
to
cuss gratuitously, but if I can insert a profanity in the proper place, I occasionally will resort to that.
Now, if I was an outsider,
right,
and let's say I went to a town hall meeting, never been there before,
right,
and let's say I saw you unload for 3 solid minutes till the buzzer hit, and you're pissed.
Well, I haven't done that for a while, but okay.
No, you're doing pretty well.
I've tried.
Let's just say I'm new.
Okay, let's say hypothetically
let's say I'm going to write an article,
right? And
I broadcast on KMUD, KZYX, and now also rerun my news on KNYO. And let's just say my name's Dan Young.
Okay, hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean,
well, I'd love.
I think it's colorful on both sides, and I know he mentioned something about like Nazi-like speaking tactics of some sort. But I also, when I read your AVA article right before that, I thought, well, you use some colorful language.
But it wasn't Nazi-esque, was it?
No, it was a little more on the fruity side.
Right.
Describing like our local person Simon speaks, or something like that.
Right.
I don't remember exactly who, so I think the colorful language, I think
it wasn't the colorful language that shot me down with Dan Young. And let me a couple of things I'd like to say about this one, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
And I'm not taking sides. I mean, he's our station manager's son. I think he does a good job.
He's the station manager's son?
Yeah, and I didn't think that one comment was necessarily. Here's where I stand, and I even wrote this on a thread. Paul had mentioned something about, I said Dan Young's news was on today.
Right, he's talking about MSP.
Yes, Mendocino Sports Plus, blah, blah, blah. So what I mentioned was, I think that, sometimes even with you and with Dan's comment, and even with my buddy Scott Peterson in some of the articles, if the language becomes a little too colored around an individual, to me, it takes away from the journalism.
Yeah, well, that's
just my feeling.
People say that to me all the time. They say don't be personal, and I don't know how else to do it. But let's
jerk.
Right there, you go. You see, how would you have communicated that without the use of that excellent little word? No, this is the thing about it is that, first of all, I think that Dan Young is a pretty good reporter. And I did not have and never had any beef with Dan Young per se, or in any kind of a general way. And you know me, if I do have even a
well, I'll be reading about it.
Yeah, even if I'm a little angry, I'll be right out there in front. I'm not kissing Dan Young, but the incident that occurred that provoked his wrath resulted in a pretty much of a straight up hatchet job. And I don't mind that, actually. I kind of like a hatchet job. I mean, I do them occasionally, and I occasionally have them done on me. I don't have a problem with that. I believe in a vigorous, rambunctious, out there, let it rip type of a media. I think that's how the information gets out there. I think that's how people make choices. I think
full throttle.
Full throttle. Yeah. This is democracy. We're like the only country on earth that really, you go to try this stuff in France. They'll
try what we're doing on any other terrestrial station.
It's not going to happen. Well, that's right. But just to take the broader international perspective, if you go to England, or if you go to France and you start saying what you want to say on the radio, the gendarmes or whoever they are will come and tell you off. We are a free speech country. I love it, and I'm proud of it. And I think it gets results, and I think it's made us strong, and I think it's the basis for our prosperity. So I am not in any way embarrassed or hesitant to make a vigorous out there media. Now, when Dan did his thing, what I found objectionable was not that he was picking on me, but that they missed the story, and the story was a damn good story. And the story was about Simon Smith. And I
thought it was mostly about like the city council wanted to adopt some like speaking rules,
They did that.
Kind of put training wheels on public comment.
They did that. It was called the Code of Civility. I recommend you to my article. It has many amusing moments. But the Code of Civility was a reaction by the Linda Ruffing social services network people to this long, grim period of being dragged. You know, when you pointed out that we flipped our city council, I don't really know if you realize, or if all of us realize how rare that is. In the United States of America, 98% of all incumbents in all offices are always reelected. We just generally keep the people in office that we've got, thinking, that it's better to know the people that you've got in there than to trust somebody that you don't know, I guess.
Sure.
But incumbents last forever. In Fort Bragg, as fast as they came up for the election, we kicked our city council out. We booted them. We gave them the boot. We brought in new guys, and we have bucked the trend. When the Code of Civility was proposed by Linda Ruffing, it was because they had just about had enough of being kicked around in the media. They said, tone it down already, drop back. Let's take a step
media? I mean, besides some of
the media, I'll tell you what, the media.
I know our paper's a lame duck.
The paper,
both factions, Mendo and Fort Bragg, is on its face.
The Advocate is a joke, and the Advocate.
Don't sue me, Advocate. This is my opinion.
Oh, they know
not
they're
the
a joke. Everybody
okay.
calls them a joke. They'd have to sue you and me and everybody else in town if they object.
They already booted me from their page. So.
They've had me on a blacklist for 10 years, Joe. So but the city management that was displaced, the city council that was booted out of office, the city manager that got fired, when the people of the city of Fort Bragg took back their government, people didn't like it. And so as a last gasp, they said, well, we're going to give you a Code of Civility so that at least you'll have some kind of general guidelines to not get into this disruptive bullshit you've been in before. Oh, sorry.
I have an idea for that Code of Civility. I should go use my 3 minutes just for a moment of silence and say, can I be any more civil than that? Just to blow time. It's 3 minutes, right? Public comment.
You're too late. The white mother and daughter team have already been doing silent protests in the mayor's meeting. They go there. And
in the mayor's meeting.
Yeah, in the mayor's Monday morning meeting.
No, I'm talking like city council, town hall, broadcast on TV.
You can get away with it for 3 minutes.
I know. Yeah, I say, well, I'd like to play you a John Cage composition.
Right.
Just be quiet.
Right. But the Code of Civility got, was put forward as a sort of a kiss off to the disruption, as they considered it, and they really spun that. When people got upset, including me. The spin was, and Lindy just posted a comment in which she reiterated this, but the spin is that we were making people afraid, that if you get up there in front of the podium and you rant or you rave or you complain or you shake your fist at them, that the timorous and sensitive people that are watching it from the audience are not going to be able to compete with that kind of animosity and don't need that kind of hostility in their lives, and things should just settle back down and calm down. Now, that may be true, and they did get their Code of Civility, but I believe the opposite. I think that when things hit the fan, people are going to get mad. And when people need to make changes, they're only going to make them when people listen to them. And they're not going to listen to you if you whisper. Sometimes you've got to yell, and sometimes you've got to shake your fist, and sometimes you've got to be out there with a protest sign. And there is no there's no getting things done in a calm, collective manner. And so when they put the Code of Civility on there, what they're attempting to do is damp down democracy. That being said, now that they've approved it, nobody's ever going to refer to it again. It passed into the river of forgetfulness that flows under City Hall. It will never be referenced again. It is a dead issue.
I could imagine, if I go back to that idea, if I was a new person in the first time in town hall and I saw like a guy like you just rail the council for 3 minutes.
Scare you a little bit, huh?
It make you a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I've never seen Ann Reneker walk up and go, oh, that Rex, she scares me.
Well,
never.
Well,
like the regulars, they know what they.
Well,
they
Simon
know.
Smith did take that position, and moreover,
I'm not sure why.
Well,
it's leverage.
Yeah. Well, no, she said she's spouting the party line, and the party line is that I, in particular, I don't mean to be like self-aggrandizing, but I think that most people would recognize me as the
I
foremost.
think if you weren't there, we wouldn't have this code, right?
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, we could agree to agree on that.
I think that's probably right. But Simon said that people were scared, and that what we had done is we had belligerently frightened away people from their participation in government, and that what she wanted to do was to tighten up that code. She didn't want just a suggestion. She wanted penalties. If you're not agreeable, you should be banned from the city council meeting. She wanted to impose a more restraining and more an iron-fisted sort of a code of civility. So there was you better be civil or you have to face consequences. And when she said that, I said to myself, I said, there it is, Joe. There is the Communist Party worker, the Nazi organizer. There's the people that come in who don't want a public discussion, who fear the kind of loud and beautiful disagreements of it, where we get opposing points of view, where people speak from their heart, where people speak from passion. They don't want passion. They don't want America. They don't want freedom. They don't want us to be speaking at all. They want to, or if we do speak, they want to make sure, very, very sure, that it's politically correct speech. And when I believe it's Ms. Smith, Simon Smith, made this, protest against incivility.
Yeah.
And said that we wanted consequences. Well, then KZXYZ jumped into it, and Dan Wong said, yeah, that's right. This guy has been, abusing his the privilege of being at the microphone, scaring everybody. We need to put a stop to it. And I say, well, fine, it's all right, Dan, to take that position, but don't you think that in the interest of fairness and good journalism, that we could kind of talk about how that came about? About the results of it, about the fact that we did in fact fire 4 city councilmen in Fort Bragg when 98% of the people in the incumbency
we just didn't reelect them. But
we got somebody else new in there.
Yes,
we fired our city manager, who's been an absolute anchor buried in our side for 20 years. Or pretty
in full
close
disclaimer, according to our sort of paper, she resigned.
Yeah, but she didn't resign.
Okay.
And Lindy Ruffing got, I said that at the podium. And Mayor Peters got right in my face about it. What are you talking about resign? Look, this is part of it. Are we going to pretend? Are we going to play? Are we going to make a little pretense? Are we going to have a fantasy? Linda Ruffing didn't get fired. She just kind of floated off into the sunset like Ronald Reagan riding his horse off into the, she didn't quit. She got fired. She got a majority of the city council that was against her. She got a majority of the people in the city that was against her, and she got kicked out on her duff.
One more mural for the Gipper.
Yeah, right. And I think that needs to be said, and to prohibit people from saying that and to try and stuff us into the political correct box is not going to fly with me, and it's not going to fly with the people of the city of Fort Bragg. This is the most freedom-loving, hardcore tree chopping down, independent, not taking. They do not want a boss. They have a free city government. They've always respected the city council. And I just don't believe that the people of Fort Bragg want to be politically correct. I think we want a working, vibrant democracy, and I think we're willing to fight for it. So Simon Smith don't want that.
There's a few people listening. I know Scott Peterson wants to do a phone in, but I don't have my phone stuff set up for this show. But next time we do this, ahead of time, we'll make for sure that I have a phone number posted and be able to field some calls next time.
So I can get abuse for more than just you.
Yeah. And I also saw a blurb that Andrew Jordan, he's a member of the Guild Hall up north and kind of active. He made a post that says he's part of the ad hoc, the IT, that must be like Internet Technologies ad hoc committee.
That's news to me. As I understood, I guess I'm guessing that I stand corrected, because my impression was that ad hoc committees were always composed of members of the city council. I
thought it was like 2 council members.
I guess I got it wrong.
Few members of the public.
I didn't think so. I don't know. I'm here to learn. I know that when they form ad hoc committees, generally they don't take any prisoners. There was an ad hoc committee formed there was an ad hoc committee formed to deal with the television station, the PEG station. You couldn't get to those guys, with a 12-foot ladder. And I know that in the hiring of the city manager, the ad hoc committee they've got for the city manager isn't taking any suggestions. So, in general, I would say that I'm right, that an ad hoc committee is a way for them to make private decisions as a city council without going public, and then to submit those to the city council. But maybe I'm wrong. If I think I might have remembered that somebody on the IT ad hoc committee was from outside of the city council. So I probably got it wrong.
Yeah, I think the last time I tried to stream a meeting, I had to load it twice, and then the meeting was so boring I let it go. But before that, it wasn't so long ago, I was still having issues with just simply loading a city meeting.
I had a lot of trouble with it too.
Once you do it, if you're using Google Chrome, for instance,
right,
used to be you had to check a box that said load unsafe scripts,
right,
which Google runs everything. Why the city you have to load unsafe scripts? Now, Linda Davis, our Marine at the city, who's got her ego Marine, complex, will say, "You're just a big baby. Change your operating system. Use a Mac. It's all or something like that."
Look, here's
the thing: what if I was elderly and I had a laptop and didn't understand all these settings? Because now, instead of load unsafe scripts, if you're new and you have to make an adjustment through Google, you have to go into your settings. Then you have to scroll to the bottom and click advanced settings. Like, you have to go through 2 levels of settings to say, okay, load any content or some little box you can check, and then the meeting will load right up.
Right. Well, Chrome does the job. I mean, if I
have to change now that I've done it on every computer, they will all do that.
But it's a really good point. And Mateo, who is our IT hands-on guy at City Hall, swears to me that we're getting a new web page. And if you surf around in California cities and look at their various web pages, we got a Soviet era web page. It's hospital green, boring, very difficult.
It's pretty sterile. Isn't it?
Very sterile, and also it's very intransparent. And it's not this is not a small thing that we have a bad web page.
Yeah.
We need a good one. We need a good one.
Just for poop disturbers like us, that we just automatically click that icon to go and stir stuff up.
A troublemaker icon.
Yeah, trouble. Having trouble, starting trouble.
Yeah.
No,
right. There you go. Yeah, but the thing is that the city council is now that we have a new city council, now we have a new city manager. We're about to get a new city manager. We've got a new city attorney. The only holdbacks from the previous era, Turner, and I would say Lindy Peters, since Lindy to me has deliberately and strongly taken the position that he wants the status quo pretty much to continue. He's not into alteration in the city council, and I don't think that's criminal. The city council has been working for a long time. I think that what we need is a more activist city council, and what we need is a more activist city, and that the problems that we see the city council failing to deal with are up to us to address. There's my dogs out in the car barking.
Is that yours or mine?
I don't know.
Sounds like mine in the room. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Double doors can't stop terriers.
Right. But I think we've got a real opportunity in Fort Bragg. It's almost unbelievable. We were a little tiny city, a little tiny logging camp locked back in the woods, far, far from everybody, and we had to govern ourselves. And now we've inherited that form of self-government, and we're still off by ourselves. And because we're isolated, and because we're autonomous, and because we're independent, I think we can do things in our city that are remarkable. We're going to be, you could never get away with the kind of public furor, the public war that has occurred over the Old Coast Hotel. Most city councils would not have listened to it. We wouldn't have paid enough attention to it. The paper, it just wouldn't have happened. We had a ballot initiative about it. We had an appeal. We've had
a recall movement that fell on its face, turned into a ballot measure.
It was
the movement was morphing as the people were discovering, how do you use this political
That's
machine?
Exactly right.
And I know many would argue, Measure P was
you put that very well.
Very well. Well, the people did this.
They did.
And okay. Going back to like the PEG TV and the Fort Bragg whatever TV,
right?
And then ad hoc committees. One guy was, I believe, missing and never really invited to that ad hoc committee that probably should have been, because he knows probably the most about local TV, which would be Eric Dwyer.
Right.
Now,
Eric wanted to be on
Eric,
it. Eric advocated for himself to be on it. They kept him off of it.
He's got a question for you.
Okay.
What do you think the incoming city manager should put a goal or focus on? Let's see. How does he say this? He says, ask Rex what the next CM should focus on different from current CM.
I don't think that.
Thanks, Eric.
It's a very good question, Eric. Eric's always a smart guy, and he's always got good questions. But I'll tell you what I think, okay? And it's a little bit complicated. But I don't think that the next city manager is going to be able to do it. I think that we have become so addicted to the authoritarian operations of the existing city manager that the city manager that comes in is not going to be able to live up to Linda Ruffing's standards.
Well, there's only so many more walls you can put a mural on.
No, there's more than that. She's done a lot of things. She's bought herself a constituency by channeling all the CDGB grants. She's kept us in poverty so that she could get the CDGB grants. I can elaborate a little bit more on that. That's kind of an off-the-wall comment, but it's factually true.
I'll give you an example. What I would like the next city manager to focus on,
right,
is, and some might disagree with, what was it, 38 grand for an exploration of putting desalination on the coast. I would like the new city manager to go full throttle, because that's a job generator. And I want to see people that move to the area with specialized skills to run that desal plant, or people here be retrained, or coming out of high school, starting with jobs, just changing filters at the desal plant.
Well,
making good money so that you can raise your kids, put them through the Little League team,
desal would
buy a home here.
Right. Desal would liberate us as a city. We could develop the mill site with desal. It's never going to happen without desal. And we could build. Desal would do a lot of things for us. So you think the city council is going to be able to do a desal plant? It took them 2 years to get a stoplight on Highway 1. I mean, these guys are not in any. So
well, Caltrans has a lot of engineering to do with.
All
highway,
right, but let me go back to what I was saying about that. The city council is systemically weak, and the city manager is systemically strong. And so the answer to Eric's question is that there isn't going to be a good resolution to the city manager problem. What we need is a change in our city government. We need to take a look at whether we're going to have a strong mayor. I think that we should start looking at the failure of having an authoritarian city manager. And let's take a look for a second.
No more wagging the dog.
Well, let's take a look at what Linda Ruffing did to us, okay? Because there's been a lot of time now that she's retired.
Glorious
so to speak.
Window blinds in town hall.
Well, let's take a look at what else.
I hate to be a jerk, and throw that out there.
Well, she spends money, but Linda Ruffing has left us a legacy. And that legacy should be recalled to mind when we take a look at who our next city manager is going to be. One thing that Linda Ruffing did is that she refused to allow us to have a chief. The city of Fort Bragg at any time has 2 cops on the street. 2. That's it. We've got eight officers that do patrol. There are 2 of those guys out there at any one time. We have a tremendous gang problem here. The advocate doesn't want you to think so, but there's a major amount of crime that goes on in the city of Fort Bragg. The criminals kind of keep it down because it's such a nice, safe haven for them.
Well, and also our ecoclimate here has a large weed consumption.
There's that too.
And I realize that some people deal and rob crops, and some people use firearms, but for the most part,
it's kind of
like money.
Yeah, no.
And so they grow their weed, they make money, buy their car, whatever.
All right, but we've got 2 cops. We've got a very under-policed city. One of the legacies of Linda Ruffing is that legacy. We had a cop come into the city of Fort Bragg as our chief of police who wanted to reform the police department, Scott Mayberry, and Linda Ruffing shot him down with a machine gun. Linda Ruffing stopped Scott Mayberry from reforming the Fort Bragg Police Department. You should ask yourself why. Let me give you some other things that Linda Ruffing did. Linda Ruffing has got us on a railroad track headed for insolvency in 2 years. When the CalPERS program comes around with their legal assessment, we have to pay all these county and city employees that we're happily that are doing their thing, and making everybody happy. We're going to be broke. I'll tell you something else Linda Ruffing did. Linda Ruffing did not just ignore the infrastructure. She made it a policy not to do the infrastructure so that she could have a liberal cash flow that she could pump into her social service agencies to buy a constituency. That's called a political machine. So when you take a look at the track record of Linda Ruffing, what you see are desolate And what about the mill site? 15 years they took to put the trail around the mill site, and we're supposed to be in an ongoing and perpetual celebration of that. That trail runs around a toxic waste dump, and their plans are to leave it as a toxic waste dump.
I found it interesting. My first
That's
walk,
their plan, Joe. They want to leave it as a that their inner goal, their inner selves, their idea is to get the people to massage the people a little bit so that they don't mind having a toxic waste dump that nobody can go on without reading a sign that limits them to 200 days a year.
So all this is the heritage of Linda Ruffin. The first time I did the Southern Walk, when that one was open, and I mean, I knew there was a wastewater treatment plant out there, and I watch a lot of meetings. Not all. I was telling you outside earlier, maybe 2/3 of the meetings I watch, sometimes 50%. I'm a busy guy too.
Right.
But what I missed somewhere in translation was that trail butts right up and stops at the. I mean, you stop
at the sewage treatment plant,
and you stand on a bench and look over. It's like, oh, that's where all the crap goes.
Yeah, right.
Nice presentation for a stopping point.
Right. Their idea, their great idea to cap that off is to put a beer brewery out there right with it, so that you could go out and see either
all the way out that far.
Well, I thought so, but I think the guys at North Coast corrected me. They said that it was over by Highway 101. So I had that in my mind, but I don't think it's actually going to be out in the sewage treatment plant.
No.
I had been told that it was.
I always thought that and the city could help with this. Not that a private business needs you to just like lay it out for them to play it out, but when the mill site property becomes more usable space, I would love to see Mendo Mill have dibs for like a half acre or so, because the entrance to Mendo Mill, I think, is blindingly dangerous.
Yeah, no, it is dangerous.
And in fact, they lose thousands of dollars of my electrical spending on parts, not because of the people or the selection, but because I don't want to get rear-ended in there.
Right.
And when you pull in and then somebody pulls in behind you, but somebody's walking very slow through the parking lot and it's jammed, cars are barreling down the street at 35, and it's just dangerous. If they could repolarize it to where to enter Mendo Mill, you go to the stoplight, go a block over, west on Oak, and make the entrance on the back side.
Right.
And then push the lumberyard up to Main Street.
Right.
Put the parking lot in the back.
Well, there's
a little plug for Mendo Mill. I don't know. I'm sure they have dreams too. Their property's only so large, but Rossi's gets my business, and this isn't really a plug for them either, but they get my business a lot because I can very safely dip over to Stewart Street and very safely get back onto Main Street.
Well, it's a good point. But I'm gonna plow forward here and try and get this off my chest. That the city manager did a spectacularly efficient job of running a political machine that bought her a constituency. She did it for years and years and years, and these guys ran Fort Bragg for a long time. Finally, they got voted out of office by people that didn't want it.
I don't think she really necessarily did a bad job.
I think she did a great job.
It just wasn't a job that represented the general population.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so what is it that I'm talking? So we reform the city council. What is it that I'm going for? What is it that all these reforms and direction and disagreements with the city council is all about? I really kind of can tell you. And when people come to Fort Bragg, they don't come here really to make money. Some people do and some people don't. But if you're going to make money, you should go to Marin County. I mean, you're cruising around Fort Bragg is not necessarily the fastest, most efficient way to get rich in California. But we have in Fort Bragg a very precious gem. We have our kids. We have our high school. We have Redwood Elementary School. We have the middle school. We have the beautiful playing fields. We have the quiet streets.
Pretty fairly rebuilt high school.
We have a wonderful kids.
A rebuilt Cotton Auditorium that should be booking more larger events.
That's a good point. Something I think, I don't know if this is true, but I think that the kids, I'm not my kids are grown up and on the East Coast, but I think that the kids in Fort Bragg are the nicest damn kids. I guess everybody says this in all communities, but I think we have the best kids in the world. I don't think that these kids have been subsumed in the negative culture that is sweeping over California.
They're all stoned.
I don't think they are.
Well,
I don't think they are.
I'm not going to say they all are, but I know through
some of them
very, very reliable source I'm related to that kids as young as middle school are dealing with those Oxycontin,
I don't doubt it.
And dipping into the heroin aspects.
All right.
So I'm not going to mention any family names, but
all right.
I know a little about it.
That should be our focus. And when I'm talking about,
and nobody talks though.
Yeah, like
not till one ODs or some kid wrecks a car and they find out he was on heroin. Yeah, I don't know how that's.
It used to be, and the people that are listening to this can write a note to themselves that I'm full of it if this is not true. But it used to be that if you go down to the development office, down to the counter at City Hall, and try and get something done, try and get a business started, try and get a building built, try and do something, you ran into a bureaucratic nightmare that was not, to which there was no equivalent outside the Eastern Bloc.
Sure.
This city was against development. It was against people doing things, and people accepted it because they had their little houses back in the streets, and we didn't have to develop, we didn't have to grow. But this whole process of suppressing enterprise and suppressing intelligent development in the sense of the mill site, the depression that it brought upon us, not to have a city council and not to have a city government that wanted to move us forward, but that was insisting on keeping us back so that they could get federal money and state money, so that they could get CDGB grants, so that they could feed a constituency. This war on our community. What do we have if we get rid of that? We're
going to have some lag time before we catch up.
Well, what we have,
it's going to almost look like a depression.
What we have when we dump that is America. We have a chance in the city of Fort Bragg to be freedom-loving, hard-fighting, independent, prosperous people, and the only thing that's standing in our way is the government that we've hired to protect us. If we will reduce government in Fort Bragg and get rid of this business of trying to keep us under the poverty line so that they can get CDGB money, so that they can fund us on grants. And if we'd stand up for our kids, and if we would make it clear that we are Americans, that we are proud, that we are out here and we're going to do our thing, we're going to be self-representing democratic people, and we're going to push for our own best interests and not allow our best interests to be defined by the city manager. If we can do all of those things, then we can make a place that we can be proud of, that our grandparents would commend us for. I don't think it's happening in the rest of California.
Well, that's not why I'm so pro desal, is not only because I want longer term solutions and putting ponds all over the place. And, the pipes and infrastructure to go from the city through the gulch and back up the other side to go back and forth from the pond, that's so much infrastructure for a storage where we could just put this, and we have this huge commercial piece of property, build it on top of the Superfund site, pour concrete over that sucker and build us a plant.
The reason that they built that pond, which gives us something like 10 days of water in a pinch or something like that. It's something like that. I don't remember the figure, but it's very low. It's a few days, a little more than a week.
Yeah.
The reason they built that pond is because it was the easiest thing to do. And because they simply didn't have the ability to be executive directors on a level that would get us a desal plant. They don't now, Joe.
Yeah.
You're dreaming about desal. They kicked him.
I'm dreaming all right.
They kicked him $35,000. But if there aren't fundamental systemic reforms in the city council, they don't have enough executive oomph. They don't have enough juice to get desal or anything else done.
We're almost out of time. So one last quick question.
That was quick.
I know. How is everything down at the pig farmer's place?
Oh, I have fallen totally in love with the 600-pound pigs. They are so, they
weigh that much?
They weigh 600 pounds. Do you know they wag their tails like a dog?
Really?
Well, not like a dog, but when you scratch their butts, they wag their little tails. Dunlap. I was talking with Dunlap and Paul. Dunlap said Paul's place is like Green Acres meets the Atom Family. That's just exactly what it's like.
With a little media slant to it or something.
Yeah, with towers and everything. Yeah.
And he's off reporting on one of the games.
He had 465,000 hits during the fire.
Wow.
So Paul McCarthy and MSP is redefining media. So are you, Joe.
Speaking of, there's a fire benefit on, and I'll be talking about that at around 6:30 during my Rhodes Auto Parts Daybook. We're doing a party at the Guild Hall up north. It's a potluck with multiple artists going to play. A lot of people, very fine musicians, starting with some solo acts and then moving up to like a 4 or 5 piece group. I'm going to be doing sound for that using.
We should all be up there supporting the guild.
And I believe it's like a $10 donation at the door, but victims of fire, the fire relief people, if you show up, then the potluck doesn't count for you. I mean, it counts. Come and eat, but we're not requiring fire relief people that are coming up to either pay a cover or to bring a dish. We just want to make you feel comfortable for that evening. And so it's some musicians putting their hearts out, doing some stuff up there. And with that, it's 5:59. So thanks for coming in, Rex.
Hey, my pleasure, Joe.
I'm going to hit my closing bumper, and we'll have to do this again. And next time, I will let people know a little ahead of time, because I know Scott Peterson had mentioned, what's the number to call in. I can field up to 2 calls. I have the board to do it.
We absolutely should do that.
I just didn't get to that point. I thought we would, an hour, like you say, it goes by really fast.
It really does.
Once you start rolling it. So with that.
It'd be fun to talk to people, though.
Yes, it would. This is another episode of Fort Bragg, USA, a.k.a. for this episode, the 3-minute limit, with Rex Gresset in the studio. Thanks for coming in. And
thank you, Joe.
I can't wait to do something like this again. You are tuned to 107.7 KNYO LP Fort Bragg, streaming on the web at knyo.org.